Namaste. One person believes aliens come to the earth to study our languages, and another person is busy searching the recipe to make somras of Rig Veda. Both of them appear to be odd and eccentric. Both of them may be instances of schizotypal disorder. We will explore today the schizotypal personality disorder, and to discuss the subject today, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste.
Namaste.
So, can we start with what schizotypal personality disorder is all about?
One can start with the basic premise that any personality disorder essentially is a non-episodic, long-term chronic disorder. At the same time, the person is healthy enough to avoid sliding into a full disorder. So the person is less healthy than a normal person, but he is more healthy than somebody who is sliding into a serious disorder. And there is a kind of a strange dysfunctional equilibrium, or let me make it more precise, a semi-dysfunctional equilibrium with which the person lives. So the person appears not normal with some strange qualities to himself. And over a period of time, it becomes normalized in the sense that those who don't like it move away from the person, and the person himself and those around him start accepting that as his very nature. When we come to schizotypal personality disorder, it is a disorder of cluster A in DSM-5. And that means the core characteristic of this disorder is the person being odd and eccentric. Now, this odd and eccentric is not something which we can cover by the politically correct term called diversity. One cannot hide behind the facade that I am just different, I am not sick. This is a situation where this is more than being different, you are positively sick. And the reason for that has nothing to do with conformity to the norm. It has all to do with the impairment which you yourself report. That it is not just being different, it is an impairment which the person suffering from and his family members, both of them know about. So this is a sickness where the person appears odd and eccentric to everyone. The characteristics of this sickness are very interesting. The schizotypal personality disorder person, because of some good childhood experiences and good constitution, has avoided getting into psychosis. But still, he is 5 steps away from psychosis. He is near to it, but he is not there. So, what we see here is the person displays some characteristics which are extremely odd and eccentric. He has overrated ideas, which have not yet become delusions because he still has insight. But he does occasionally believe in overrated ideas, and occasionally is very frequent. It is not a rare occasion. So he frequently believes in overrated ideas. He has some strange beliefs and ideas. He may join some cult which is into some esoteric magical practice. He may join some cult which goes to the Amazon forest to find something. He may join some group to study the UFOs. He may join some group to discover the ancient Somrasa of the Rig Veda. So he has very strange, eccentric interests. And this causes impairment to him. If there was no impairment, it could just be a choice of living. But this is not just a choice of
Right.
living. This is not just being different. The impairment stamps this situation as a disease. This is
True.
one fact about the schizotypal personality disorder. Secondly, if we look at the DSM description, the DSM
Mm-hmm.
description is something like this. The person has overrated ideas. The person has strange beliefs. The person has strange interests. The person at times has strange illusions, not delusions, but illusions, which
Mm-hmm.
after some time he realizes were illusions and insight is developed.
Right.
The person has some paranoid characteristics. The person
Mm-hmm.
fears that somebody is talking about him. There is some sort of overrated idea of reference. The
Right.
person believes that somebody may do something to him. The person also keeps away from people. Occasionally, he has difficulties of anxiety and low mood and irritation,
Mm-hmm.
outburst of anger.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at all of this, it looks like a mixture of milder form of psychosis,
Mm-hmm.
milder, some part from the paranoid personality disorder, and some part
Right.
from the schizoidal personality disorder.
True.
So this is a very interesting kind of disorder where you have some diluted components of psychosis, some
Mm-hmm.
diluted components of paranoid personality disorder, and some components
Mm-hmm.
of the schizoidal personality disorder. The point is, we are differentiating here between a person who is healthy and
Mm-hmm.
interested in esoteric areas like parapsychology, mysticism, and spirituality, and the
Right.
person who has this disorder. A healthy person also can have an interest in UFOs, and a person
True.
with schizotypal can also be interested in UFOs. The difference is in terms of rest of the life and the impairment or achievement.
Hmm.
So this is how the schizotypal disorder is. It appears very strange because it's very difficult to find a single psychoanalytic phenomena diagnosis of this.
Right.
Because there are so many different clusters of traits. There is one cluster
Mm-hmm.
which is centering around paranoia. Second cluster centering around relationship avoidance. The third
Mm.
centering around being odd and strange. So this three
Mm.
cluster of traits is what constitutes this schizoidal personality disorder. And people say that if stress was to increase and this person
Mm.
was to slide down the
Mm-hmm.
mental health line, the most likely place he would end up would be in psychosis.
Right. That's quite fair enough the way you described it, that it is more to do not just with the trait, but the combination coming from different clusters and probability of entering into psychosis. And then you also explained that how the impairment part is so significant, where the person becomes distressed and dysfunctional. So when we come to the psychoanalytic explanation of the causes of causation of this disorder, what would school of psychoanalysis look at it? How it is going to look at it?
It is worth to repeat the reason that when we say somebody is stable in a personality disorder, it means two things. One,
Mm-hmm.
he is not normal enough not to have personality disorder. At the same time, he is not sick enough to have a real serious disorder, which means we are
Mm-hmm.
looking at a semi-dysfunctional equilibrium caused by the health and the sickness factors. In all probability, therefore, we may be looking at a situation where the first few months of life would have had very positive experiences for the person, which have created the healthy
Mm-hmm.
part of it. And after that, something traumatic has happened. It may be one event trauma. It may be many traumas, which we call the situation of complex trauma. Or it may be over the time learning because of the way the parents were, or the society was, or the school was.
Right.
Or it may be a combination of these things, an event or a set of events, and then long over the time learning. But somehow these two have combined. And in most cases, the over the time learning, instead of sort of remedying the situation, actually adds to the disorder. The most common thing is that the person has faced an event-led problem, and then over the time that has got consolidated, developed into a larger pathology or a more intense or stronger pathology. So this seems to be the case with most people in personality disorders, that initially they had some healthy part in their childhood, and then a trauma setting or a series of trauma setting, and this was then fortified by virtue of the way the parents were, the school was, or the neighborhood was, or the society was. Right. This being the general case. Coming specifically to the schizotypal personality disorder, we would have to address and find an explanation in psychoanalysis for all the three cluster of traits that we see in this disorder.
Okay.
So if we start with the first one, the paranoid traits, that indicates that possibly the person has had very early life object loss or inadequate mothering. The mothering was inadequate, or the mother was absent for a reasonable period of time, and there was some sort of perceived or actual object loss. And that has led to the fear of the attack of the bad breast, which accounts for the paranoid traits that he has, that the world is not a safe place. Attack can come from anywhere. And this again we find in a more magnified form in antisocial personality disorder and paranoid personality disorder. So the fearful parts of this schizotypal personality have to do with the open split, have to do with the early life object loss, have to do with the fear of the attack of bad breast, have to do with some sort of catastrophic thinking, which is rooted in the fear of the bad breast.
Right.
And then, very interestingly, we also see in the same person the relationship avoidance characteristics.
Right.
So the relationship avoidance characteristics denote a phenomena very near to the phenomena of secondary narcissism. That one of the responses they gave to their frustration of trying to relate to the object of desire was to decide not to relate as enthusiastically or as openly henceforth. And therefore, they have very few relationships, and there are some schizoidal traits in the schizotypal also. So this the schizoidal traits, the limited interest in relationships, having fewer relationships, they signify to us some sort of phenomena very near to the phenomena of secondary narcissism.
Right.
That you decide not to relate in a full measure out of your primary frustration of trying to relate during childhood. So one of the outcomes of the object loss, or it can also be not an object loss, but a cold object, a cold, non-reciprocating object. So the object may be present, there is no loss, but the object is not emotionally available. So there is a physical presence of the object, but a loss of the emotional object, or the emotion in the object rather to say. So that also can be one case, one situation where the person develops this resistance to going full out and having full relationships without holdbacks. Okay. Now, which component is stronger in the schizotypal depends upon what kind of trauma has happened and how he has responded to that trauma. Okay. Is it object loss? Is it the hold object? And constitutionally, how did he respond to that either of the situation? And then there is also in this schizotypal personality a sort of a feeling of possibly getting cheated by somebody, being betrayed by somebody, which may not be so obvious, but is often found when we probe into them, that there is some sort of a lurking feeling that somebody may cheat them, somebody may betray them, and that tells us about the Oedipal betrayal. That in the Oedipal phase, the person has faced a betrayal, and that has made the person quite bitter. And therefore, the movement towards being odd and eccentric is not accidental. There is a reason why the person has chosen not to go on the normal path and take the detour into odd and eccentric. And the detour into odd and eccentric has an element of bitterness at the way the world is. It's a repulsion and recoil away from the world.
Very interesting.
It's a repulsion and recoil away from the mainstream because of the bitterness of experience, which is which can be over a period of time also, but in event terms is largely centered in the Oedipal experience. The betrayal by the object of the Oedipal choice. That is, the object is seen as betraying, untrustworthy, almost cunning and slimy. That creates a sort of a combination of pain, anger, and disgust, which results in recoil away from the object. And the object was sort of a signification of the mainstream. Had he crossed the object, he would have proceeded on the mainstream. But now there is a detour. The detour also has some interesting implications. Apart from this bitterness, it is also a significant pointer towards narcissism of standing apart. So one of the things that has happened in the early object laws is also creation of some narcissistic traits. The person may not qualify for narcissistic personality disorder, but would have some traits. So being special, avoiding competition, and standing out is also one feature of this odd and eccentric. This odd and eccentric is also meant to make oneself special, stand out from the crowd to which the person does not belong. He is high above them. And also to impress others by doing something different. It is also...
Can I add something here? Like when you say that it is not a full-blown narcissistic personality disorder because of some kind of magical thinking involved here because of the early stage of life?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Not only is the magical thinking involved, the grandiosity is subtle.
Right.
It's not as overt as in the narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
And there is a sort of a sadness, a kind of a pain of leaving the mainstream also. There is a non-grieved pain, which is not yet been gone through grief. The grief not processed of having left the mainstream. So he has not left it just like that. It has been a very intense separation in the unconscious level.
Right.
So there is one part of the unconscious which has been very forceful in repulsing, in rejecting and kicking away the mainstream. But the second part for which it has been a very painful process to be away from the mainstream. This being odd and eccentric also has a price. Not only the overt social price, but a very strong, very overt and very strong social price in the unconscious. A huge amount of pain of separating from the mainstream, the bigger. Right? That has all the objects of intense attachment of the person from whom he is separating. And he does not want to. He wants to be in the mainstream, but he cannot be because of so many things that happen. And then there is this magical thinking of finding something out of this world. The world is not enough. So that is another element of the schizotypal. The world is not enough. There is a very interesting statement of Sri Aurobindo. He says, all that the world can give is not enough.
Can relate to this.
Yeah. So there is also an element of the search of the surreal, the search of the non-normal, search of out of this world, which is a sort of a sublimation of the early life magical thinking. So the magical thinking is not completely sick. It is not the childhood magical thinking as it is. It undergoes a sort of a sublimation.
All right.
Now, in this being odd and eccentric, you also have the healthy parts of the person. And in being odd and eccentric, there is also a part of the person that is alive, that is creative, that is healthy, that is full of enthusiasm and exhilaration in doing that odd and eccentric, whatever it is. So that odd and eccentric also is a source of aliveness, of playfulness, of exploration, and of practicing the sublimated parts of oneself. So, and it's one of the reasons why the person has not slided into something serious, more serious, is because of this healthy, alive, creative, playful part. So this very occupation or the preoccupation with the odd and the eccentric, in one sense gets him labeled, in another sense helps him sustain that equilibrium, which does not allow him to slide further.
Right.
So this odd and eccentric, we have to be very careful about that. If we try to just curtail it out of the life of the person without developing an alternative resource or the alternative destination to which the healthy parts of the person can be focused, it may actually be detrimental to the person. And therefore, till an alternative is established, the odd and eccentric also has a helpful function to discharge. And otherwise, what will happen is that you stop this and you don't have an alternative, the person will feel highly uncomfortable. Some of them will even regress to more difficulty. Some of them will feel depressed because the energies have nowhere to go now.
True.
So that is one part. The second part is, can this odd and eccentric itself be used to turn towards health? And that is a very important element of it, how to positively use this odd and eccentric. So there is a world of meaning in what is labeled as odd and eccentric. It is not without reason that it exists. It is not without purpose that it exists.
True.
So we look at it psychoanalytically, the phenomena which are involved in causation are the open split, the fear of the attack of bed breast, the intense pain of non-reciprocation by an object of love in very early life, leading to reduction in openness to interpersonal relationships, almost like a micro form of secondary narcissism, and a turn towards the odd and the eccentric. Another way of looking at the odd and the eccentric is this. we are looking at id, which is not getting under the control of the ego, which wants the person to conform to the mainstream. And this component of the id, which is moving away from the mainstream, is because another part of the id of very early life was very deeply frustrated. So we may also be looking at the increasing the capacity of the ego. But that, I think, is secondary in this case, except for a few people for whom this odd and eccentric might not be a healthy detour. Of course, a semi-pathological healthy detour out of the unconscious suffering that they have, but it may be because of a very fragile self of the Gaussian pathology type. So for some people where the Gaussian pathology of a weak self is at play, and the odd and eccentric is because the ego is too weak. In those cases, we can look at a more Gaussian kind of approach, and the whole idea there would be to re-establish a healthy self and a strong ego. But in most cases, that is not the case, and we find that the odd and the eccentric has its own meaning and purpose. So this is how psychoanalytically we would look at the causation of schizotypal personality.
Actually, it is very fascinating how the school of psychoanalysis goes in depth of all the symptoms being caused there, and how beautifully it can actually explain with each and every stage and step how the pathogenesis has taken place. Now, when it comes to healing, I would ask you to just throw some light there that how psychoanalysis can proceed with healing of personality disorders such as schizotypal.
We have to proceed first with the Cohusian approach of creating a safe holding space. Because we have to be prepared for the long run. When we are healing a mild intensity episodic disorder, it's like changing the interior decor of a house.
True.
But when we are trying to heal a personality disorder, it's like changing the RCC structure of the building.
So true.
So therefore, it is not easy to change RCC structure as easy it is to change the interior decor. Because something is so deep that it has become a part of the person, and we are not just asking the person to increase something or reduce something, we are almost asking him to become a different person.
Right.
And this, of course, is not easy. So one, we have to be prepared for a long-term therapy. We have to start Cohusian, and we need at least 2 to 3 sessions per week for 2 to 3 years for the real progress to be made. After the first Cohusian part is over and a safe space, a holding space is established, and in that part, often the person may need the self-object experiences.
True.
It is very important, not only for narcissistic personality disorder, for which, of course, it is very important, but for most personality disorders, that the classical approach of interpretation often pushes back what is trying to come up. And therefore, allowing things to come up and allowing person to really live out and not act out, there is a difference between the two. To live out on the couch is deepest fantasies. Without interpreting that and truncating it and pushing it back. So, making a clear difference between living out on the couch and acting out, we allow the living out. And it goes on for quite some time. And once the Cohusian part is done, And we don't have to do a complete cohesion therapy. But at least the first few sessions, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, if we do the cohesion holding, allow the person experience the safe space, allow him to have self-object experiences where we don't bring our knowledge or our logic to criticize what he is saying. And then we get into eclectic therapy. Because here we will need some Freudian insight, some Kleinian insight, some cohesion insight, some Winnicottian insight, all of that together. What not to do is not to use certain Kleinian concepts. I mean, the Kleinian therapy is very good. For pre-Oedipal pathology, it's a very good therapy. For early life pathology, very good therapy. But for personality disorders, I would not say the same thing about psychotic disorders.
Okay.
We can deal with it differently. But for personality disorders, where even though a pathological equilibrium, but an equilibrium is established. It is there. The person is not in a state of disintegration. It may be a dysfunctional equilibrium, but there is an equilibrium. You have a functional person. You may have a partly functional person, but you have a functional person.
Right.
So the reality testing is intact. The person is partly functional. And therefore, we have to be careful that the interpretation does not lead to disintegration.
Okay.
And what happens here is that every interpretation will lead to a micro disintegration. And after that, the person bounces back into more health than he was before the interpretation. But if the person does not have the strength to recoil back, and he just keeps sliding because of the interpretation, it creates a different kind of a situation. And that kind of situation is very possible in personality disorders, especially those with a slightly fragile ego. So we have to be careful that if we are dealing with a personality disorder with a slightly fragile ego, then certain types of Kleinian interpretations or certain focus of the Kleinian type is best avoided.
All right.
And this is, I think, so very near to what Kernberg used to say. The Kleinian therapist, Kernberg. And he used to divide patients into three. Those with whom full psychoanalytic therapy could be done. Those with whom we could not do really interpretative therapy, we can only do supportive therapy. Because if we do interpretative therapy, they will end up in a state of more disintegration and they will be worse off than before.
And because somewhere the therapy becomes the attacking bad breast there?
Yeah, because there is no capacity to undo the micro temporary disintegration that an interpretation brings.
Right.
So for a normal person, when you give an interpretation, it is like a spring. So you go back 1 feet and then you come ahead 5 feet. So there's a temporary going back by 1 feet and then you come ahead by 5 feet. It's a metaphorical example.
Retracting it.
Trying to communicate something which is very subtle and elusive. But this is the kind of metaphorical explanation one can give. Now, if you have a situation where the spring goes back but does not have the capability to come in the front, it just keeps going back. So the person does not have the capacity to tolerate an interpretation.
True.
So when the interpretation is given, the person disintegrates more. Instead of temporary disintegration in a large synthesis, far more than the disintegration, which is the case in a normal case.
Normal case.
So this is where Kernberg says, for them, we can only do supportive therapy, where very strong interpretations, which actually can hurt the person, disintegrate the person, cannot be given. And the third category Kernberg says, where the fragility is so high that psychoanalytic psychotherapy simply is not possible. Because the very frame of psychoanalytic therapy, of coming in, lying down on the couch, not seeing the person, speaking what one feels, somebody is behind you, right? And he's by and large is giving an interpretation, no matter how soft an interpretation is. The very frame of psychoanalytic psychotherapy is disintegrating to the person even before the first interpretation is made. When the fragility is so high, then the very act of lying down on the couch becomes a problem. And actually, when you see patients, they actually will sit up on the couch. They won't be able to lie down. So, some of them, after a few sessions, will be able to lie down. Some of them just can't lie down. So, when you're dealing with that kind of extreme fragility, those are the ones that Kernberg says we can't do psychoanalytic psychotherapy with, because the very frame of psychoanalytic psychotherapy is disintegrated even before the first interpretation is made. So for them, even supportive is not possible. Now, in that context, what I want to say is this, that in schizotypal personality disorder, or in any personality disorder for that matter, if the fragility is seen, and if we don't know whether the fragility is there or not, it is best not to go in for some very early life, very pre-linguistic, very difficult to swallow kind of very early life Kleinian interpretations.
Okay.
And the good part is that most people don't even know what they are. So the question of using them does not arise. But this is for those who know what they are. So those best be avoided, and those who know it would know what I'm referring to. So we start cohesion, then we do an eclectic thing, avoid the most difficult parts of Kleinian interpretations, okay? And then go forward, ask the person also to put something in behavioral practice. To add to this, I have found something very interesting, which I have put into what is called the Valley Junction model of personality disorders.
Okay.
So it is a model to explain how a personality disorder originates. And what that says is, in essence, in short, I can say that there is a person going on a normal path, then object loss happens. Because of that, the person develops high amount of anxiety, rage, helplessness, powerlessness, self-devaluation, inferiority. And that is where I say he goes in the low state, the valley state, as though you were traveling on the road, you were standing on the road, suddenly you find yourself in the depth of the valley. And the valley state is a state of high amount of fear, anxiety, pain, helplessness, powerlessness, rage, paranoia of attack, and so on. And because you cannot be comfortable in that valley state, you have to jump out of it using some defenses. And which defenses you use and jump out of it in what way determines which personality disorder you develop.
Okay.
For example, the person who has intense inferiority can use reaction formation and emerge, jump out of it as a narcissistic personality disorder. Or he may focus upon object loss and say that I must regain my object by doing something dramatic, so he emerges out of it with histrionic personality disorder. Or just to the same inferiority, the narcissist uses the reaction formation to come out of it as a narcissist, giving reaction to inferiority. Somebody can accept inferiority and say that I am inferior and I need somebody to depend upon to sail through life. So he comes out of it the same inferiority as a dependent personality disorder. Now the point is, without going into details of this model, One very good way to heal personality disorders is this, and this I have tried it. It works. At least whatever small sample I have put it. After a few cohesion sessions and a small amount of interpretative work, take a session to explain this model to the person. I took one session to, many times, not once, but I take one session to explain this model. Second, and then ask the person to go over it for a week and see how it works or does not work in his real life, especially during the manifestation of symptoms.
So that is the behavioral practice of the explanation you just gave.
Yeah. So you explain it to the person and then you say, apply it for a week. See if this model explains your state, your mind, the way symptoms develop in you, the thoughts and feelings which come before the symptom and after the symptom. And let me know if it works for you or not. Let us say the person says, this model I do feel works for me. In reality, I do feel this explains a lot of stuff happening in there.
Okay.
Then ask the person to apply it for 1 week. How do you manage this? If this is the way it works, we can do some cognitive work to tell the person, cognitive behavioral work, to see this is how it can be managed. And thereafter, the ISTDP technique to explore the feelings.
Okay.
And bring down the feelings which are involved and come back again to the synthetic psychoanalytic, eclectic synthetic psychoanalytic. And with this, I have been able to shorten at least the mild personality disorder cases to almost 4 to 6 months.
Oh,
it was unbelievable. I never figured out that it can anyway be this quick. I was always looking at 2 to 3 years and a success rate of not more than 50 to 75%. But this has created a very good success template. And later I recollected that the father of Indian psychoanalysis, Dhirendra Shekhar Bose, also used to use this method.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was the father of psychoanalysis in India. He was actually in touch with Freud. He had correspondence with Freud. And he used to take a few sessions and then give some material of Freud to the patient to read and again start new sessions.
All right.
And that used to help him in overcoming a lot of taboo discussions which otherwise are difficult to have in India.
True.
So this is one
part move, I would say.
Yes, yes. So this is one way of looking at it. A long-term psychotherapy, 2 to 3 days a week, 2 to 3 years. With some innovations, you can shorten it, like the one I narrated. You can also add CBT, DBT, and psychodrama. To this, they are very powerful tools because, okay, I'll come to it in the holistic healing part. But for the moment, let me just say the central psychoanalytic psychotherapy, cohesion followed by eclectic, using some innovative tools like using the model of personality development or personality disorders, doing behavioral work, and coming back to the eclectic psychoanalytic psychotherapy stuff, using ISTDP in between if one feels. It is a complex thing, moving from one technique to another, not easy at all, but it does give results. And I believe, if not for everyone, at least for a few people who are ready and open and conducive to this, congruent to this, one can use this sort of accelerators to accelerate the process.
So the entire concept, right from the different clusters you had mentioned earlier, how the holistic healing would help the person, because somewhere as you're explaining, I feel there is a lot of part of a person in this personality disorder spectrum where different modalities can take care of specific things out there. So how can we relate the holistic healing basket here to the person suffering from schizotypal disorder?
Homeopathy has some promising things to offer with respect to changing the fundamental aspects of personality. There are skeptics who say it doesn't work, but then there are admirers who say it works. So that is one element worth a try, where homeopathy is one element. Then we have acupressure, acupuncture, pranic healing, and Reiki, and Tai Chi. And all of them in different ways focus upon how to remove the blocks of energy flow. So pranic healing has one way of doing it, Reiki has another way of doing it, acupressure has third way of doing it, but essentially it's the same. How do you remove the blocks in the path of energy flow? And obviously when we say the person is stuck in a personality disorder, obviously there are blockages.
Yes.
So it will need a step of belief to go in for this holistic healing, but it does help. One, in removing the blockages. Two, in addressing the derivative outcomes of a personality disorder. So the very fact that you are odd and eccentric will make you pay a price for it in the real world. And this price will lead to some sadness, some anxiety, some anger. And they have to be removed. These collateral damages have to be addressed. And these collateral damages can be well addressed by Reiki, by pranic healing, by Tai Chi, by relaxation techniques, by yogic techniques. The person also needs relaxation. Another element of holistic healing is very important, and that is social group joining. In personality disorders, acceptance is very important. So acceptance is often the beginning of change. And this acceptance from a social group is very important. Admiration from a social group is very important. Social work also is very important in two ways. One, the person realizes that his difficulties are difficulties, they are not his assets. The sickness easily becomes ego dystonic. And the person realizes the price he has to pay and is ready to fight after the dystonicity is established. So in case it is not dystonic, in groups, when one goes for social work or social groups, you can't escape the fact that the problem will be pointed out by somebody as problem, or you will just realize it. So what ought to be dystonic will end up being dystonic. Another important element of holistic healing is this. When you have a personality disorder, there is a large part of life you have not lived. And I would here combine Jung's principle of compensation, the existential philosopher's principle of exploring life and living fully, and the techniques of psychodrama and Avishkar. For example, the moment you say, I have a schizotypal personality disorder or a schizoidal personality disorder, there is a large part of life you have not lived because of this disorder.
So true.
And there is a part of you which wants to live it. That part has been silenced by other parts of the personality. It does not mean that part does not exist. So what you have not lived out has caused quite an imbalance in life. And the Jung's principle of balance and compensation has to be brought in. That how can you make the person, or let me not say make the person, how can you facilitate the person recognize that there are large parts of life, a part of him wants to live, but he has not been able to live out. And how can you address this problem? So this can lead to behavioral therapy techniques. This can lead to living it out in the real world. This can also lead to using psychodrama to live out what has not been lived out. So using Jung's principle of balance and compensation, exploring what parts of life the patient has not lived out, talking to him to find out what parts of life you would like to live out. And on those bases, create a psychodrama. That can be a very focused and a very deeply insightful psychodrama. And a very congruent psychodrama to the needs of the person. And this also would lead to an existential roundedness of the person and some sort of fulfillment. So these are some of the elements which I believe we can add to the central healing process of psychoanalytic psychotherapy combined with CBT-DBT. That can be the center. But these elements of yoga, of pranayama, of homeopathy, of psychodrama, of Indian technique of Avishkar, which is like a psychodrama, which is focused in a slightly different way. It is more like a kind of a one-man or two-man psychodrama with a sort of mystical basis. All of these are there. And then you also have the whole realm of idol therapy in visualization to live out those parts which are difficult to otherwise live out. So that conscious living out of the unlived because of the skew in life owing to the disorder. That lacuna, that void of life can be addressed.
That's very interesting, Mr. Vedya, when you bring in the Jungian concept of balance and compensation, where the person reclaims the life and reunites with the part of self which is not being lived, or which even he have given up the hope of, of its existence. That brings a confirmation that there is so much of potential for a person in this specific disorder where he can actually work on the parts of himself which are unexplored due to the disorder itself. And that brings us to our next question, which I would like to know, that how this patient education would be important in context of this disorder.
It is important because first we have to prepare the person for a long-term work. Healing a personality disorder involves a lot of time, lot of cost, lot of energy. It requires a long-term involvement of expert, and that involves cost. It involves facing pain. For example, when you do psychoanalytic psychotherapy, during the process, there might be phases where intense depression may come out, intense anxiety may come out, and the person has to navigate through it. There is a price of pain, there is a price of discomfort to be paid. This healing is not easy, there is a price to be paid.
True.
And the person has to be ready for that. The person also has to be ready to change himself in a very fundamental way. And discover in a deeper way that authenticity did not mean something that has been with you for so long. The false, which seems more real than the real, may have been with you for long, but it is still false, it is still a defensive edifice.
Right.
So just because something has been with you for so long, just because you feel uncomfortable leaving it and being in the alternative, you have to pass through what Kierkegaard calls the dizziness of freedom, the anxiety of freedom.
Yeah.
Because that phase is going to come when you are moving, you are giving away the past and anything else from future is yet to come. So that is a phase of intense isolation, of loneliness, of depression, of anxiety, and one has to pass through. Thirdly, the person needs to work on himself. This is not something which can be solved only in the therapy room. So the person has to work upon himself outside of the therapy room on a cognitive and behavioral basis. Fourth, it has to be a multi-directional approach of using holistic healing, using multiple tools of therapy, and doing social work, getting involved in social groups. doing some yoga, learning Reiki or pranic healing, it has to be a multi-directional approach. And many parts of this multi-directional approach are parts of active healing, where the person has to do something. Homeopathy can be passive healing. You just take the pills and the pill will work. Reiki and pranic healing, you can still outsource to somebody, he can do it for you. True. But other parts of psychodrama, of breathing, of relaxation, that is what something you have to do. So there's a large component of active healing where one has to participate and do something. It cannot be sit back, relax, and it will happen. So we have to be ready for, get a person ready and get his will for it. His will for it is very important. This is not something which can be done. Yeah, please.
Yeah, as you explained with that example that, you know, one work is, if you have some other kind of issues, it's something like you're doing interior decoration of home. Yes. And when it is to do with personality disorders, it is to do with the structure. So you collapse the structure and recreate one. It has to be, you know, there's a lot of involvement from all the possible facets of life. The destiny, of course, the right therapist, the self-education, the self-efforts of the person being actively involved. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yes. And what you just said, all these efforts of the person and long-term persistence and not feeling the fatigue, not throwing down the arms and getting off it and say, I just can't do it. All of this is necessary. And then we have the regular part of knowing what works and not work. Does not work on the person. Right. To know which approaches work or don't work. And then to get the person into the holistic healing process also. All of this requires quite an amount of psychoeducation. One of the important element also is, and this is the first element actually, is to make the person aware that what he has is a disorder. It is not just being different. So first, create awareness to make him understand the price of this disorder. And 3, make it ego dystonic. And 4, get his will so that he is ready in the real sense to fight it and cure it.
Right.
So all of this is essential, and we can accelerate the process by, if we do psychoeducation right, to put these things in place.
Coming to the caregivers, the family members, and the environment in which the person is living, what should be the family members and caregivers do to help someone who's suffering from this disorder?
First is to stop persecuting him for the traits of the disorder that he has. Second is to support him because it is quite an amount of time, energy, and cost. And that needs support. Third, when he does something on the front of holistic healing or even on the front of the conventional healing, not to mock at him and make fun of him. This is something which is very peculiar, and I see a lot of it in India at least. Making fun of somebody who is doing scientifically the right thing. Fourth, know what is happening to him so that they can report rightly about what is working and not working. For which both the patient and the caregivers need a minimum education on how the problem is developed and what is going to solve it and what is the goal state like. A minimum education is required on these fronts for both the patient and the family members. And lastly, help the person access the tools of holistic healing, get the person into right social groups, support his being there. He may have to spend a lot of time and energy and cost to be there and participate there, and this may involve a professional cost. So support all his efforts and make sure that they themselves don't develop secondary problems of anxiety or depression or something of that sort while this intense process is going on, where on the way, intense anxiety, intense depression, uh, wrong decisions being taken, or cost of holistic healing, all of that is born. So creating a conducive environment for long-term work at home and supporting the person, it can be facilitated, made more easy, consolidated, made strong if the parents are open, positive, and we can adequately psychoeducate them.
Usually we have seen in families when people enter into the long-term therapy, the families, they withdraw the support. They feel, now you're in the therapy, now you should start showing some healing signs, and you should not do this. So how crucial it becomes for them to have the equal amount of patience to understand that therapy is not an instant process, it's a slow process. And beautifully you have explained that role in which they are supposed to be in. Thank you, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya, for sharing your knowledge with us. We have covered schizotypal personality disorder. In the subsequent videos, we will be covering other disorders from DSM-5 in the same way. Do watch our coming videos and write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
Namaste.